The CCP relied on peasants to gain power. The rural residents in the CCP-controlled areas in the early stage of its build-up devoted all they had to the CCP. But since the CCP obtained control of the country, peasants have experienced severe discrimination. After the CCP established the government, it set up a very unfair system, the residential registration system. This system arbitrarily classifies people into rural and urban populations, creating an unreasonable separation and opposition within the country. Peasants have no medical insurance, no unemployment welfare, no retirement pensions, and cannot take loans from banks. Peasants are not only the most impoverished class in China, they also carry the heaviest tax burden. Peasants need to pay a mandatory provident fund, public welfare fund, administrative management fund, extra education fee, birth control fee, militia organization and training fees, country road construction fees, military service compensation fees, and in addition to all these, they are also required to sell a portion of the grains they produce to the state at an artificially low fixed rate. They must pay agricultural tax, land tax, special local produce tax, and butchery tax, in addition to numerous other levies. In contrast, the urban population does not pay these taxes and fees. In a tree farm in eastern Sichuan province, upper-level authorities distributed 500,000 yuan for a reforestation project. The leaders of the tree farm put the first 200,000 yuan into their own pockets and allocated the remaining 300,000 yuan to tree planting. But when passing through each level of the government, more and more of the money was taken away, and in the end very little was left for the peasants who did the actual tree planting. Those in the government didn't need to worry about the peasants refusing to work on the project, though. The peasants were so impoverished that they would work for very little money. This is one of the reasons that products made in China are so cheap. Many people believe that trade with China will promote human rights, freedom of speech, and democratic reform in China. After more than a decade, though, it is clear that this assumption is only wishful thinking. A comparison of the principles of doing business in China and in the West provides a good example. The fairness and transparency of Western societies are replaced in China by nepotism, bribery, and embezzlement. Whether China decides to buy new aircraft from France or the United States depends on which country keeps quiet on the CCP's human rights issues. Many Western businessmen and politicians are driven and controlled by economic profits from China. Some information technology companies from North America have supplied specialized products to the CCP to block the Internet. In order to gain entry to the Chinese market, some Internet websites have agreed to censor themselves and filter out information disliked by the CCP. This huge blood transfusion to the CCP economy from foreign capital is very apparent. But in the process of investment, foreign capital did not bring with it the concept of democracy, freedom, and human rights as fundamental principles for the Chinese people. In its propaganda, the CCP boasts about the unconditional cooperation and even flattery given by foreign investors and foreign governments for the CCP. By making use of China's superficial economic prosperity, CCP officials have become extremely adept at colluding with businesses to divide state wealth and block political reforms. People are often heard to say, "I know the CCP often lied in the past, but this time it's telling the truth." Ironically, in retrospect, This was what people would say each time the CCP made a grave mistake in the past. This reflects the ability the CCP has acquired over the decades to use lies to fool people. The communist movement, having made a big fanfare for over a century, has brought mankind nothing but war, poverty, brutality, and dictatorship. With the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European Communist parties, this disastrous and outrageous drama finally entered its last stage by the end of the last century. No one, from the people to the General Secretary of the CCP, believes in the myth of communism anymore. The communist regime came into being due to neither divine mandate nor democratic election. Today, with its ideology destroyed, the legitimacy of its reign is facing an unprecedented challenge. The Chinese Communist Party is unwilling to leave the historical stage in accordance with the current of history. Instead, it is using the ruthless methods developed during decades of political campaigns to renew its crazed struggle for legitimacy, revive its dead mandate, and continuously provide a living environment for the parasitic evil specter. In this historical moment today, it is especially important for us to understand clearly why the CCP acts like a band of scoundrels and to expose its villainous nature, so that the Chinese nation can achieve lasting stability and peace, enter an era free of the CCP as soon as possible, and construct a future of renewed national splendor. From the policy of improving the treatment for the intellectuals after the Hungarian Revolution in the 1950s, to the policy of plots of land for private use, free markets, and enterprises with responsibility for their own profits and losses, implemented in the rural villages after the Great Famine in the 1960s. From the movement of ideological emancipation after the Great Cultural Revolution in the 1970s, to the deepening reform after the Tiananmen massacre in the 1980s. Throughout history, whenever the CCP encountered crises, it would demonstrate some traces of improvement, enticing people to develop illusions about the CCP. Without exception, though, the illusions were shattered time and time again. Today, the CCP has pursued short-term benefits, and in doing so, has produced a show of economic prosperity that has once again persuaded the people to believe in fantasies about the CCP. Let us look at what the People's Daily, the mouthpiece of the CCP, said in a front-page story on July 12, 2004. Quote, "The historical dialectics have taught the CCP members the following. Those things that should